Hey everybody, I am Lou Anders, the publisher of Lazy Wolf Studios, publisher of the Thrones and Bones adventure books for 5th edition and now Tales of the Valiant. But we're not here to talk about that today. Today, we are going to talk about the Game Master's Guide from Kobold Press and why I like it so much. I'm going to do a semi-deep dive into it. I think that Mike Shea, aka Sly Flourish of the Lazy DM, has said on more than one occasion that of all the various Game Master guides out there right now, the 2014 edition from Wizards of the Coast, the 2024 edition from Wizards of the Coast, Level Up A5E's book, and now this is his favorite, or at least this is the one that has the most utility. And while, with the exception of the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, I haven't done as deep a dive into the others as he has, I have to agree. Sometimes you read a book and it has a lot of great advice in it, and you internalize that advice. You say, "I'm really glad I read that. This is a great book, and I'm excited to have this in my lexicon." But then you don't refer to it again. You've gotten what you needed from that book. Whereas with this, I find that I keep this open or I refer to it digitally when I play almost every game session. So I'm going to go through it page by page and talk about why I find it so exciting and why you should check it out. And before I do that, I want to clarify something too. I think sometimes people are seeing the name Tales of the Valiant and thinking this is a completely different game system and there's nothing in it for you if you're still playing D&D, whether you're playing 2014 or 2024. And that's not the case. This is when they say fully compatible, there's nothing in here you couldn't dump right into your 2014 game. Just like there's no Tales of the Valiant adventure that you couldn't run for 2014 or 2024 characters. Maybe even might even work better with 2024 characters. But there's nothing in this that isn't applicable to the wider world of 5th edition games. So credits page, picture of the alternate cover, very pretty. I never get alternate covers. Table of contents, introduction, the obligatory using this book, gorgeous art. The role of a game master. It's always good to read that again, even if you've read it 100 times. But that's not why I'm excited. Let's keep going. They do something. How to be a GM, GM lexicons. They get to a thing on play styles, players' play styles, different kinds of personalities that show up at your table. The actor, the explorer, the inventor, the power gamer, the watcher, the person who wants to sit there and observe, and just some advice for how to bring all of these people in and make sure they all have a chance to shine, but they don't overshadow any of the other players. And that's this is the section that you do read and internalize and you don't really refer to that much, but it's a good section to have. The wild card. I've got at least one of those in my game. And then getting started, how you start your session, how you build out more good art, prepping a session, planning, making notes, crafting encounters, what kind of stuff to have, battle grids, narration, maintaining player agency, very good. Rule of cool, growing your game, checking up with your players, what to do about missing players. We may have that problem tonight for a little bit. We had that problem last week when someone didn't wake up. And then we get to adventures and campaign. Again, gorgeous artwork. I believe that's we have William O'Brien. Always excellent work from William O'Brien. Then they have the flavors of fantasy: dark fantasy, high fantasy, low fantasy, weird fantasy, science fantasy, and they define tiers of play and the structure of play, quests and encounters, adventure setting, a nice rollable table to where you want to start off your adventure, a word on what campaigns are, using published settings versus building them, the themes of settings, the structure of settings. This is all very good stuff. Ending a campaign. Then we get to world building, another gorgeous, gorgeous piece of art. Oh, a lot of that. And how to start developing your setting, what to build, when to build. Good advice for it, incorporating secrets and clues. I mentioned Mike Shea. We know he had something to do with this section. And the types of secrets and clues and how to use them in your game. I think I'm going to start including secrets and clues as a section in upcoming publications. Haven't done so far, but we're getting to the wider world and some products coming out next year, and so we'll start using secrets and clues more for that. Thank you. Mapping your world, and they just have this nice location name, random table generator if you need some location names on the fly. style of your world, making a map, civilization, customs, government, rulers, Brian Syme artwork. Ooh, scary ruler there. Conflict, how to build conflict in your setting, gods, different types of religions, not just monotheistic and pantheistic, but henotheistic. Divine manifestation, how active are the gods in your world? The types of beliefs, another rollable table. We're going through that. Rituals, creating a multiverse, planar models. Now we get to chapter 4. We're 50 pages into this book. Chapter 4. And this is the chapter that, for me, I really started to fall in love with the book. So they talk about styles of combat, battle grids versus theater of the mind, using theater of the mind, some practical advice for if you're playing in theater of the mind, how do you know how many people are targeted in area effect spells, how you can do that and still be abstract. And then, the abstracted map, combat encounters, zones for combat. They have an idea of the encounter budget, which again is, I know, Mike Shea's hand in this book, which is a much simpler way to calculate CR and figure out what's a deadly, what's a hard challenge for your players. And then we get to this section. Look at this: bosses and bodyguards, bosses and minions. And what these are for 3rd level, 8th level, 13th level, and 18th level, just a grab bag of monsters you can have right now. What monsters are you going to put in that you can use to make it like a 3rd level? If you want a boss and bodyguards, you could have an Ettercap and 2 swarms of insects. Whereas at 18th level, that might be a Baylor and 2, God, I gotta pronounce that, Glabrizus. And then they go with bosses and minions, which is a different setup. And again, it's just a quick, handy reference. Grab this thing in. Twin bosses, triple bosses, a boss, bodyguard, and minions, hordes and rivals. Look down at rivals. A 3rd level example for rival: a mage apprentice, a spy, and 2 thugs. Let's jump to 13th level: a master alchemist, an oni, and 2 chimeras. It's a nice just sampling of, we need not just a single monster, but a group that our party can face. Wolf pack. And they have a section on incorporating settings and themes, siege weapons, hazards and traps, spell effects, special combat scenarios, aerial combat, large-scale combat. Now, large-scale combat's all right. I'm glad it's not better for me. I mean, again, it's my personal opinion, but I'm actually working on a large-scale combat model mechanic. So if this were perfect, I'd be upset. I'd have to table mine. So I'm glad that there are things I take issue with here that I can still develop what I'm developing. So in that way, the book was even better for me. Multi-phase combat. This is with many opponents, having them coming in waves to spice up the combat. Siege combat. Underwater combat. Vehicle to vehicle combat. Now they have some wonderful additional rules on top of the vehicle rules they have in the player's guide for driving checks, ramming other vehicles, etc. Special combat scenarios, monsters and swarms, colossal enemies. You can climb on their backs, jumping up on top of them. Quick, simple rules for adjudicating when your player says, I want to run up the back of the Tarrasque. How do I do that? There it is, page 69, jumping on the back of the Tarrasque. Minions and hordes, ways to run those, best practices, and now we get to variant rules. Page 72. This is where I really get interested. Rules for Bloodied. I'm glad to see that's coming back everywhere. Called Shots. Expanded Doom. Okay, so if you don't know, Tales of the Valiant has 2 mechanics that the first replaces inspiration, and the second is sort of the bad guy's version of that. Luck is a mechanic where when you fail an attack roll or ability check, saving throw, once per turn, you earn a point of luck. And then that can be spent 1 for 1 to increase a dice roll. So if you roll a 14 and you need a 15, you can spend 1 luck. If you need a 16, you can spend 2 lucks. If you spend 3 luck, you get to re-roll, but you have to keep the new result. And luck is it's meant to be played with a lot, and because if you have more than 5, it resets. So you've got to keep spending it. You keep earning it and you keep spending it, and it gives you that little edge. But bad guys have their own version called Doom. And depending on the tier of play, the bad guy, the CR of the bad guy, they get a certain number of doom points they can spend to um, get a recharge on something that didn't recharge, like their breath weapon or some other power that's on a recharge. They can spend the doom. They can spend the doom to affect the dice roll or negatively affect a player's dice roll. And this expands it. Some of the rules in here are ways that if you've got like a time sensitive scenario and your players are going through the dungeon but they decide to take a long rest after every encounter, you can keep adding doom points to the bad guy so that the fight is getting harder and harder based on their dragging their feet and not getting to it faster and faster. That's wonderful. Expanded spell melee attacks, dirty tactics, overrun, pilfer, reposition, shove, tumble. Now cover. I love this rule. If you jump behind cover, like you duck behind a table and people are shooting at you, if the attack roll misses because of the cover, but it would have hit without it, then the cover takes the attack. So you're behind a table, it adds 5 to your armor class, we roll, the attack misses because of that 5 to the armor class, 3/4 cover, but it would have hit you without it, then the table has to absorb that damage. If it happens enough, the table busts, of course, with the rules for objects and hit points and AC. So with just hit points in this place. Now, if you take cover behind someone else, so you jump behind one of your party members, in this instance, if the covering object would have been hit and you wouldn't be hit, then your buddy got shot or the giant you jumped behind got shot. And that I love that rule because I'm kind of tired of combat when my archer is standing 40 feet away and is shooting into a group of like 5 monsters and are surrounding a player and somehow or 5 players surrounding a monster, I'm sorry, and somehow the monster gets hit. The arrow just weaves, let's do that. The arrow just weaves. So in this, if you're taking cover behind someone, or if your party member is trying to shoot over your head to hit a monster, they may get hit. Injuries. Now that's something we're using. One of our characters lost an eye. They have an injury table. A lot of these injuries, internal organs and broken ribs, they heal with magical healing. So I don't, it says it heals after 10 days or with magical healing. I don't think there's any scenario in which someone's going to wait it out for 10 days. The only time I think that might come into play if you're playing a resource management hex crawl type game and you really have to watch out for your spells and someone decides to live with it. But more often than not, I think what happens with these injuries is they just make you burn healing spells in the middle of combat so that they don't penalize you for the next couple rounds. But a couple of them, like the loss of an eye or a loss of a hand, those can't be healed until you get like regeneration magic cast on you. So we have a character right now that lost an eye when they were severely injured, and as a result, she has disadvantage on ranged attacks, which is bad for a ranger. But they're not high enough level to heal that eye yet. Don't worry, things are coming. Parry and defensive combat and parting shots. You're running away from the fight, but you can try and take one shot at the bad guys before you duck away, or they can take one at you. Advanced exploration. Another look at that. Another beautiful cover from beautiful painting from William O'Brien. Unusual environments, planar travel, elemental planes, plane of shadow. They've taken their rules for shadow corruption from their 5th edition world book and they have adapted it to Tales of the Valiant play. Glad to see that because we play in Midgard a lot, or we have done air travel, water travel, ship navigation. So they tell you about the wind speeds and how that affects travel, whether you get becalmed and stuck or whether the wind is with you or against you, storms, uh, what you can see in the water, how far, depending on the water clarity. That's really useful. Seaborne encounters, dungeons. Now here is a thing on mapping, good advice for mapping, and then a lot of tables, randomly generated dungeons. This is a section of the book that I think a lot of people are going to get excited about. I'm not one of them. We don't do a lot of dungeon crawls, and I tend to work with my partners, Heroic Maps, and use their maps, their pre-made dungeon maps. So I don't see myself sitting down and randomly generating a dungeon with this. But dungeon dressing, chambers, dungeon contents, mausoleums, mazes, vaults and grounds. But it's you can see if you're the person who likes procedurally generating dungeons, random traps, random tricks, it's a lot of really useful table material. Lot of useful table material. Contents of containers, furnishings, scrolls, utensils, puzzles. Now this is something. Good advice for making puzzles, and then some ready-made puzzles to drop in, including, riddle me this, a list of riddles that you can just take and put right into your campaign. Boom. I'll go through that fast so none of my players read it. Don't pause the video. Additional rules for weather. Now, I just used this. For tonight. I don't this video may drop after it, but tonight for me, we're running some overland travel going through a woods in wintertime in thick snow, and I randomly generated the weather ahead of time for every day, and they have both the weather conditions, the precipitation, and the wind speed. And then for each one, after you've generated it, you roll to see whether it gets better, worse, or stays the same. And it was a lot of fun to just go through that. And, at the table, it might slow you down, but I did it ahead of time. I did it for 11 days. And so I know the upcoming weather, and it's going to be great. And of course, there are hazards that have to do with those weathers. Let's back up. Random encounters, travel exploration, food scarcity table. You're going to forage here, and again too. One of the things that Tales of the Valiant did with is that they nerfed Goodberry a little bit. You can't get sustenance from Goodberry 2 days in a row. So that brings back a little bit of the need to forage and to track rations in a hex crawl. And so here we've got a nice table for food and water scarcity. Then advanced social, NPCs in a campaign, allies and who they are, villains and their schemes, antagonists, backstories, generating NPCs, who is the quest giver in your campaign, fantasy names to make up NPCs on the spot. Here's a sample NPC. I think we've seen her in one of the short adventures they published. Tips for running NPCs, their flaws, their wants, their traits, and their bonds. I'm glad to see that still around in some fashion. Factions and how to make factions, suggested factions. It's a good list, like clergy, criminal, ethnicity, merchants, military, nobility, spellcasters. Elements of a faction, the tiers of a faction, what happens in each faction. If you're fighting that faction or involved with that faction, values, goals, leadership, membership. A sample faction you can take right there and drop it in. Additional rules, attitudes, starting attitudes, NPCs, and how that adjusts. We've seen this before, but it's good stuff to have in one place. I mean, this is the kind of thing that a lot of this was left out of the 2024. I don't think this was, but a lot of stuff was left out of the 2024, and it's good that it's still around in the GMG. And it's stuff that you do need to have on hand. You do need to know and use. Status. Now they had a status system in their 5th edition games, and they've changed it a bunch, and I like it. I haven't used it yet because I would use it when I start a new campaign. But this is something I really want them to dump into their BFRD, their system reference document, Black Flag reference document, because I want to play around with status, and I can't play around with it and publish what I do unless it's put into the reference document. But it's a nice system for status, and it's a little simpler than they used to have, a little easier, and it fades over time. So if you don't keep up your relationships, the relationships dwindle, which makes more sense than just a point score, which is what they currently have. Example scores for levels, and your status is within an organization. So this is taking the Radiant Dawn organization. This is showing what your increased or decreased status with them brings you or costs you. Adventuring options, diseases, hazards, and traps. And they have a nice table of the severity of the disease by tier for a setback, a dangerous or deadly disease, and the effect of the disease, the save DCs, and attack bonuses. So it's a really nice table to help you make your own diseases and stay, within acceptable ranges. Then they just have a bunch of diseases. Really nice. And curses. And I haven't gotten to curses. Hazards. And then Hazards, they have a lot of additional hazards to what was in the player's guide. Acid rain, chemical fallout, alkaline terrain, arcane instability, blizzards, blood bells, burning mans, growth, crumbling monuments, desecrated ground, extreme cold. Do you think maybe the guy who publishes and runs games set in the frozen north might just be planning to use extreme cold sometime soon? Extreme heat, no, not me, but one day. Freezing waters, gale winds. Oh, there's a good one. Ghastly swords, hornet's nests. Hornet's nest is a fun hazard you don't think about. Lightning storms, etc. Um, quicksand and variant quicksand. Then we get to torrential precipitation. Also, violet mold, webs, wild mist is a really good one. I won't spoil that. And traps, both simple traps and some pretty unusual traps. A nice bunch of traps you can throw in there. Good stuff in the traps. Downtime. Downtime is a mechanic that 2024 ditched that I love, and I'm so glad that Tales of the Valiant has kept it and expanded it. And part of they've done here is some fairly decent. They're not overly complex. There's a couple companies that have books of crafting rules, and I've gotten a few of those, and I've enjoyed them, but I don't see myself reading and remembering a whole book to run crafting. So they have just a couple pages on crafting, scroll making, potion brewing, and it works really well. Dread. Now, Dread they did just put into their BFRD, their system reference document, the Black Flag reference document. Dread is a great mechanic. It's a substitution for madness that doesn't stigmatize mental illness, but gives you a way to deal with the unnameable horrors that might shock your PC and cause them to have debilitating effects, either temporarily or long term. I love Dread, and I have big plans for Dread down the line. So I'm really glad that entered the VFRD. I love Dread. Firearms. I don't know how I feel about firearms. I mean, I love that they exist in RPGs. I think it pushes the envelope, get out of that Middle Ages, get a little further along in your analogous history. I don't know whether I'm gonna have firearms in my world or not, but I love these firearms, the weapon options. That was something that they introduced in Tome of Heroes. I'm glad that they've brought it into Tales of the Valiant. Magic items, new category, artifacts. Artifacts are play. What makes a good artifact? A bunch of artifacts. Look at them all. Look at them go. All right. Poisons, rewards, downtimes, treasures, luck. Now, treasure types. Let's go back. This is interesting. They have types of treasure, and then they get to treasure by tier. And they have this thing called treasure bundles. I think if I passed it, no, there it is. So the idea behind a bundle is you pre-roll all the treasure that you're going to give out in that tier of play, and then that you have a pool of treasure, and then as you play through that tier, you hand it all out to when you finish that tier, you've handed out all the treasure across multiple adventures. I haven't played with that yet. I don't since we just my own campaign just ran out of my published material and is heading into unscripted territory, and I don't know how many sessions we're using milestone leveling, and I'm playing it here, so I don't know whether this is gonna work for me or not. I tend to forget to give out magic items though, and I can see how having a pile of them just right there with you would be a good thing. Um, treasure bundles, random magic tables for generating magic items, siege weapons. Vehicles expanded, more vehicles. Look at that. 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 Um, some really great vehicles, variant chase rules, runnings chases, initiative variants, monster harvesting. This is fun. This is fun. It's a couple pages on how to harvest from monsters. And instead of giving you a huge list of new magic that you can make with it, that then you have to have this book on hand. It's more like the monster pieces will help you crafting your own spells, potions, etc. They cut some of the cost out. They serve for certain ingredients, and it's a fun mechanic. I haven't used it yet. Um, I need to read it again and offer it to my players because I think it's something that would be a really nice, slightly creepy thing to add. Skill challenges, how to Homebrewer's Toolbox. Now, this is flat out my favorite section of books. I'm gonna toast it real quick, and then I'll talk about it. One of the things that was somewhat criticized rightly in the original 2014 DMG was the rules for making monsters, and it was left out entirely of the new DMG. And some people were hoping, like me, that it would show up in the monster manual, but it didn't. So there are currently no official guidelines for how to make monsters for Dungeons and Dragons 2024 edition. They are here. So, homebrewing, before we get there, I'm sorry, homebrewing advice for lineages, heritages, backgrounds, talents, subclasses, all good advice. Magic items, artifacts. This is a great thing here. It's the price range for artifacts by rarity. Crafting spells. Now, here's another good one. Look at this table. The average damage per circle, which is what they call rank or level of spell. So you know if you're making a 4th level spell, it ought to deal between 25 and 40 points of damage. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you can apply that back to magic items too, and magic weapons. It's a great table. A nice clear guidelines for how you can make a magic item and not have it be underwhelming or overpowered. Magic sources, hazards, dangers, now creating monsters. Elements of stat block. First, they start with the advice of how to modify a stat block. And that's wonderful for most people who are just playing, not publishing. Grabbing a monster and reskinning it is a great way to have a new monster quickly and easily. And that modifying a monster is wonderful. Traits you can drop into your monster, like elemental body or evasion or flyby, things you can put on a monster as you're modifying it, and how that would affect it. And then they have templates that you can drop in, like clockwork or um, lich or elemental infuse or lycanthrope. So you can use. They have a role called controller, which is like a boss monster, or not a boss, but a monster running other monsters, and just things you can do to apply to an existing monster to make it a soldier, make it a leader, make it a striker, and give it a little something extra to differentiate your monsters. But that's not the part I'm so excited about. Let's get to the part I'm excited about. That's a cool monster they made as a sample. Look at that. I know that's beautiful. So, creating a stat block. This here, my favorite thing in the book. They give you really good guidelines for step-by-step creation of monsters, and I've used these. I've made probably 50 monsters with it so far. I've taught other people how to make monsters with it. It produces really consistent, dependable results. So they have this table. You start out by saying, I need a CR4 monster, and right across the board, it tells you what the average what the publicity bonus is, what the AC range should be, what the hit points, starting hit points. Remember that. Attack bonuses, damage per round, save DCs. Then after you do that and you make your monster and you add your traits in, they have this table here. Unfortunately, it got split across 2 pages. They have this table here of what things cost or earn based on what they do. So if your monster is its AC is low. For every 1 point, its AC is below the average for its CR. You add 5% to its hit points. Whereas for every 1% it's above its armor class, you deduct. Other things like, how many conditions it's immune to or how many conditions it's vulnerable to. How many damage types it's vulnerable to. Can it regenerate? All the various things that a monster can have that flavors a monster and gives it ability bonuses or penalties. And you add all the percentage points up, and then you apply that to that base hit point. So if your monster ended up with a 20% penalty to its hit points and you knew that its base was 100 HP, it would start with 80 HP. And that's how I talk about balance. It's really balanced when you do that. They have special rules to apply, including like how to determine how many its damage per round based on area effect spells and things like that. And then they get to these let's get through templates. So, like a template for a fiend, a template for a devil, a template for an ooze. And you know this is something that all monsters of that type have. So every ooze is going to have an ooze nature and an ooze resilience. And it gives you a way to apply this to the creature by creature type that gives you some of its base abilities that it shares in common with all others of that type. And for undead, they break that out into things like vampires, which are a little bit different from other undead. That was the most useful section of the book. I absolutely love it. It's invaluable. I'm so glad it's there, and it's made monster making a joy and fun. You know, there was a little bit of a learning curve, but it was a fast learning curve. And as I say, I've taught other people how to do it, and I really love it. Then the book ends with a whole bunch of random encounters by by tier and location. So you're in the Badlands Tier 1, you're in the Badlands Tier 2, you're Badlands Tier 3, and Badlands Tier 4. Coastal, deserts, farmlands, forests, grasslands. So you need random encounter tables using their monster vault for every type of terrain and every tier. You're off and running. This is a highly useful planer, highly useful set of tables. Underground. He just keeps going, pages of useful encounter tables. Random dungeon dressing, make an instant town. Magical curiosities, trinkets and treasures. What's inside a castle, environmental encounters. Then we get to the end and the obligatory fantasy inspiration. What books and what films and TV shows and what games and what nonfiction you should look at to get inspiration for your campaign. Secret. I want to end up in one of these lists one day. Okay, I've got 5 novels out. I'd like to end up in one of these lists one day. Read Thrones and Bones for some fantasy inspiration, everyone. And then an index. Always good to have an index. An obligatory commercials at the end. No problem there. So that's the Game Master's Guide from Kobold Press. Phenomenal book. Highly encourage you to pick it up. Whether you play Tales of the Valiant or not, of course, I encourage you to play Tales of the Valiant. It's a fantastic system. Thank you. If you like this, like and subscribe, and please check out my work and check out our stream too. Thank you so much. We stream on Wednesday nights, and all the books are on Drive Through RPG, and it's Lazy Wolf Studios or Thrones and Bones. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.